The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has announced that at last the United States will stop withholding support for Ukraine's Azov Brigade. And so we take a look at the history of this famed fighting unit, which began as a union of football hooligans and intellectuals working to defend Mariupol and other cities from Russian imperialists way back in 2014. We also today take a look at the situation in Kharkiv, and we touch upon two controversial stories, one involving Mustafa Naim, a beloved Ukrainian leader of the Maidan Revolution of 2014, seemingly banned by the government from going to a conference in Berlin. And we take a brief look at the story in the Times of London about President Zelensky's chief advisor, Andriy Yermak. This is Joe Lindsley reporting from Ukraine each and every weekday of Russia's full-scale war, live on Chicago's WGN Radio with host Bob Sirott. Today we are joined by guest host Wendy Snyder, and you can watch our video version of today's report here.
It's Wendy Snyder sitting in for Bob Sirott this morning, and we go live to Joseph Lindsley. And Joseph, I have to be honest with you, I was a little worried this morning because I went to go to UkrainianFreedomNews.com and I saw the site can't be reached. So then I worried about you.
Well, it's good to worry because we have lots of difficulties here at times. Wendy, hello from Lviv. Today, the reason for that, we're launching a new website that we've been preparing for several months with our team of Ukrainians. And so hopefully all the kinks will be worked out and the brand new website will be ready sometime today. But, it's one reason why it's taken us so long to get the new site within Ukraine, the power situation has been incredibly difficult. And it's amazing the work that people are able to do despite these difficulties. We have one of our animators for our video projects is in Odessa, and they have just a couple hours of power a day very often. And you learn to work around it. You get your power banks and you keep going, but it is difficult. And even I suspect today right now we have a good connection, but there's a chance I might even in the next 2 minutes have to change to a different network to keep the connection. So these are. This is the real problem because of Russian attacks upon Ukrainian infrastructure. But Ukrainians adapt. And I was talking over the weekend with a Ukrainian girl. I hadn't seen her in a while. She had been abroad for a while, and she was living in another country in Europe and working. And she was so miserable there. She wanted to come home to be surrounded by people with a common purpose. But she was saying it's frustrating not always having power. And she said, a year ago, in the winter, it was romantic for a while to have candles, but then you get tired of that. You want comforts, and Ukrainians find a way to adapt. And she said she needs her Netflix, and she's got 20 power banks to keep all of her devices going. And so this is the spirit you see here, but it's difficult. We've seen, as we've talked about the past few days, Kharkiv city has become much safer. Ever since the U.S. gave permission for Ukraine in a limited way to use some American weapons to hit Russians on Russian soil near the border, we've seen it really has made Kharkiv safer. But it's still vulnerable. And yesterday, for the first time in many days, the Russians sent glide bombs upon Kharkiv city. So it's still vulnerable, and there's a lot to be done there. And Ukrainians still need more permission to use even better tools from the U.S. To fight back. But even amid that situation, we look at the places in northern Kharkiv region where the Russians in early May started to make an incursion. They haven't made any ground since May 20th. And we're starting to get reports today that Ukrainians are starting to push the Russians back to try to retake that now totally destroyed city of Volchansk, a small city on the border. I saw a video today of the Georgian Foreign Legion, people from the country of Georgia, who also hate the Soviet legacy of Moscow, fighting for the Ukrainians, making incursions to take that territory back for Ukraine. And I think today, there's a couple of major, very, in some ways, controversial topics swirling around. You look at the European elections, and you see that there was a surge in far-right parties. As I mentioned yesterday, the story that gets missed there is that actually the bigger surge was support for parties that want quick victory for Ukraine. That was actually those were the majority parties, and they even defeated, for example, the ruling the ruling party in Germany, which has been hesitant to send weapons. So that story has been missed. But as you look at there is indeed a surge of far-right parties throughout Europe. And, that never happens in Ukraine. And it's amazing that Moscow has created this, narrative of far-right Ukraine. But Ukraine is, it's a conservative country, but sort of in a genteel way. All different traditions are welcomed and embraced. And there are no, far-right parties here that have any traction, unlike in countries throughout Europe. And on this score, today, the United States announced through the State Department and the U.S. Embassy here that the famed Azov Brigade of Ukraine is now eligible to receive funding from the U.S. This is huge because back in 2018, some members of Congress, led by Democrat Ro Khanna, pushed to ban American funding for the Azov Brigade under the pretext that it was a neo-Nazi battalion. This has been a big Russian propaganda. And even, a lot of foreign reporters just sort of take that for granted, and they write about Azov as some kind of neo-Nazi group. Well, so Azov is, the Sea of Azov is a little sea off of the Black Sea, the shallowest sea in the world. Ukraine has a coastline there that's totally occupied now by Russia. These beautiful cliffs with the sandy beaches at the bottom. And on that coastline is the city of Mariupol. And in 2014, after Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity, there was freedom in the country. There was no police, military. The pro-Putin regime fled. The people were in charge. And Putin took advantage of that that's when he took Crimea. And he tried to take cities like Kharkiv, Odessa, and Mariupol. And Azov was formed from football hooligans and creative intellectuals. So, not a common alliance.
Yeah.
But they formed together to defend their city. And they defended Mariupol, and they kept the Russians out in 2014. And so the Russians created this propaganda narratives. They're neo-Nazis. I mean, some of them were pretty rough. They were like industrial town football hooligans. But I have a Jewish friend, for example, who grew up as childhood friends with one of the co-founders of Azov. So at last today, the United States government has said, we recognize this is a false narrative, and Azov is some of the best fighters for Ukraine. So they are now eligible now to receive support from the U.S., which is good for Ukraine because they are some of the most, probably one of the best sort of special forces you have within Ukraine.
I like hearing about good news for Ukraine, and I like talking to you. So you think the new website might be ready to announce tomorrow when we speak to you?
Oh, it's always dangerous to say that. Yeah, I do hope. Yeah,
okay.
Lots of work to be done amid power outages, and but when it is ready, we will let you know. Meanwhile, you can follow my work at our team's work on my Twitter at JP Lindsley. And we don't have any more time today, but I should note so that people know that we can talk about this. But there are two controversial stories that have to be addressed about Ukraine. One is the resignation of the guy who's in charge in the government for reconstruction, Mustafa Nayyem. He's an Afghani Ukrainian. He's actually married to a Jewish woman, and they raise their kid Jewish, even though he's Muslim, a sign of modern Ukraine. He quit the government because he said he was banned by the government, by the prime minister and others from going to the reconstruction conference in Berlin. This is a huge topic. And then also the Times newspaper from London had a story following up on a story from the Washington Post several weeks ago, exposing concerns among Ukrainians about President Zelensky's key advisor, Andriy Yermak. These are, if you're here in Ukraine, you know what people are complaining about, that people have been talking about these things for a while. Now they're becoming very public, big stories, but perhaps something we can address in detail tomorrow.
Yes, that sounds perfect. Stay safe, Joseph, and always a pleasure to talk to you.
Wendy, until tomorrow. Likewise, thank you.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on? На чьей ты стороне? Come on now. Oh, which side are you on? На чьей ты стороне?